Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Moravian College. My name is Gary Kasklitz. I'm the chair of the Economics and Business Department here at Moravian, and I'm so pleased that you could all join us this evening for this very interesting talk. I'm looking forward to it, as I'm sure you are as well. It is my pleasure to be able to present to you this evening a noted rabbinic scholar, best-selling author, speaker, and popular radio show host, Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Rabbi Lapin immigrated to the United States from England, where he was living and studying. He was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, where he spent his early boyhood into a family of many generations of rabbis. His studies in both Israel and England included Bible, ancient Jewish wisdom, mathematics, physics, and economics. Rabbi Lapin insists that they are all connected. He fell in love with America on the second day of what was originally intended as a 3-week visit. He never left. As president of the American Alliance of Jews and Christians, he has been a Jewish community leader in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the Seattle area, and in Los Angeles, where he established the now legendary Pacific Coast Center near the beach in Venice, California. He married one of the congregants, Susan, to the shock of her New York parents. Rabbi Daniel Lapin is in demand as a speaker, presenting seminars and training programs for executives from many of America's major companies, such as Boeing, Nordstrom, and Disney. He has been a featured speaker at hundreds of other diverse organizations and institutions, including Family Research Council, Crystal Cathedral, Harvard Law School, and the congressional opening of the 106th Congress in Washington, D.C. His popular radio show is broadcast from his flagship station, KSFO, in San Francisco. He and his wife are the principals of Life Codes Media and Publishing Company, and together they host the Ancient Jewish Wisdom television show every day on the TCT cable network. In 2007, Rabbi Lapin was designated as one of America's 50 most influential rabbis by Newsweek magazine. Rabbi Lapin is the author of 3 best-selling books, including Thou Shalt Prosper, The 10 Commandments for Making Money, and recently, Business Secrets from the Bible, Spiritual Success Strategies for Financial Abundance. He teaches around the country on business and finance. He and Susan lived for years on Mercer Island, Washington, where they homeschooled their 7 children. They are all ardent voters. Rabbi Daniel claims to know the navigable waters of Puget Sound better than any other bald Orthodox Jewish rabbi. A few years back, Daniel and Susan sailed their family from the West Coast all the way trans-Pacific to Hawaii on their 44-foot sailboat. They recently relocated to Baltimore, Maryland, in order to be close to their children. We're honored to have Rabbi Lapin with us this evening speaking on what is so immoral about making money. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming one of America's most influential rabbis, Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
Thank you very much indeed, and I'm very, very grateful to Moravian College and the Economics and Business Department, Professor Rossi, and all of you who have come out here this evening. I must say that I appreciated the introduction, but it always strikes me as odd that on the few occasions that I've been invited to speak about our boating exploits at one yacht club or another, never once in the introduction has anybody ever said, oh, and he's also a rabbi. So, why am I here? There are certainly many wiser economists and many more experienced business professors. I have one bizarre qualification, and that is I started a number of years ago asking the question of why are Jews disproportionately good with money? Now, I should issue a caveat here, and that is that if you are not Jewish, you should not say what I just said. Because that would be anti-Semitic bigotry. However, since I'm circumcised, I may ask the question. And here at Moravian, I think it's fitting for me to observe that this may be the only time in all of academia where the removal of a small piece of skin converts bigotry to research. You get it? Sometimes it takes a moment to sink in. And that's really what I researched and focused on, because it's completely inescapable. Now, in the United States of America, Jews constitute about 2% of the population. And again, my apologies to my co-religionists. I know this part of the talk makes you really uncomfortable, but I'll be past it real quick. Now, this is not to say that there are no poor Jews, but it is to say that the people of Israel have always been disproportionately good with money. 2% of America's population are Jewish. That means there should be 8 or 9 Jews on the Forbes list of 400 richest Americans. There's usually about 100. That's a very significant overrepresentation. And there it is. Every single list you examine, Jews are disproportionately represented if it has to do with money. Now, in order to research this in an academically legitimate fashion, I had to also contemplate possible explanations that were unpleasant. For instance, the original Oxford English Dictionary has an entry for the word Jew as a verb, as in to Jew somebody. And so, I mean, is honesty the best policy? Not at all. It's by no means the most expedient policy. Total moral flexibility is the ultimate expedient policy for the short term, obviously. And so is it possible that Jews achieved financial and economic prominence simply by ripping everybody off? And I didn't think that was likely. We have our scoundrels just as everybody else does, but is it disproportionate? No, it isn't. And it was not hard to find hundreds of people to interview who were not Jewish themselves but have enjoyed decades-long business relationships with Jewish individuals. So it was clear to me that if in fact Jews had a reputation, a well-earned reputation for reprehensible approaches to business integrity, people would know about it, people would stop doing business with us. It's as simple as that. And so clearly that was not the explanation. It's probably as well to dispense quickly also with the most flagrantly dumb and racist explanation. And I'm astonished at how often this gets trotted out. But you only have to use your intelligence for a couple of minutes to see this makes no sense at all. This theory says that the Russian Cossacks killed off all the poor Jews. The rich ones bought their way to freedom, leaving them free to reproduce. And as everybody knows, there is a money gene in male Jewish sperm, right? And there you go. But there are people who actually do believe that. So, clearly complete and utter nonsense. Then, of course, there's the theory that Jews constitute this great, big, cohesive club where we're all devotedly advocating for one another's interests and taking care of one another. And I guess the only way I can describe that is in a way that those of you who are members of churches certainly have no concept whatsoever, but Jewish synagogues are seething cauldrons of political intrigue. The idea that Jews all love each other, some of us are lovable, present company included, but by and large, we're just like everybody else. And you've only got to look at some of the most conspicuous lawsuits between Jews. There was a famous one that took place with Michael Eisner in Disney, and he referred to his former Jewish partner and friend. He referred to him in court documents as a repugnant little dwarf. The idea that we all sort of help each other along and we give each other a leg up, Just like everybody else in our inner circles and among our friends. Yeah, of course we do. But this notion that somehow Jewish financial success is explained by that bizarre notion is completely nonsensical to anybody who served on the board of a synagogue or of any Jewish organization. So that one, is ruled out as well. So, what's left after we explore all the fallacious explanations? What's left? And what's left is nothing other than a vast body of tips, tools, techniques, strategies, insights that explain how the world really works. It's as simple as that. And business and money are very much a part of how the world really works. As a matter of fact, I think it's safe to say that if you had limited opportunity to teach your children only a few things, I would focus on only sex and money. If I could be sure that my daughters knew everything there was to know about how a man functions, and that they knew everything there was to know about the nature of money, where it comes from, how it works, I would consider them to be really well educated at that point and really well equipped for life. And fortunately, we were able to do just a little bit more than that, and that's because Mrs. Lapin was in charge of their education, not me. But that would really be, for me, the central core, because that is central to how the world really works. Male-female relationships, money, that's kind of it. And if you don't believe me, then I would recommend that you check either online or in your local bookstore, and I saw there's a beautiful one just a few blocks away, but most of the others seem to have gone, and check and you'll see that the most popular categories of self-help books, and the self-help category is probably the most popular genre in publishing, but the two areas in the self-help category that are literally by far and away the most popular, I mean like by large orders of magnitude, male-female relationships and money. How to do better in those two areas. That's it. And it's not an accident that way back in the days of Mark Twain already, Mark Twain wrote a famous essay concerning the Jews, and he referred to these two areas. He spoke about the fact that Jewish family life was strong and structured and durable, and he spoke about Jewish economic life. And so there's no racial explanation, there's no sociological explanation, and it's really very simple. We are the people of the book, and the book is very specifically a book. And this book contains a great deal of information about money. It also contains a great deal of information about sex. And I'm talking about the Old Testament specifically, obviously. And so much so that the Old Testament contains at least 20 times more rules and structures and principles about money than it does about the Jewish dietary laws called kosher food. And so these things formed the background of my work, of my research, and subsequently of my writing and of my publishing. Because it became obvious to me that Jewish economic prosperity had nothing to do with eating chicken soup, although it couldn't hurt. It had nothing to do with being circumcised, because if it did, many would prefer poverty. No. Thank you. It's always nice when there's at least one person that appreciates the occasional. So, thank you. So it became clear that these secrets, if you want to call them that, had nothing to do with external factors like what you ate or whatever you did. No, these were principles that were absorbed as part of Jewish culture. And part of that was making education an important thing. And part of that was relationships. And a very important part of it was overcoming a natural and completely normal instinct to regard making money as immoral. Now, I have to tell you that nobody can succeed at doing something that deep down you consider to be morally reprehensible. I recall a very strange television encounter where I was on a show together with a guy called Goldstein of blessed memory. Goldstein was the publisher of something called Screw magazine. Now, for those of you who have led a blessedly sheltered existence, I should let you know that Screw magazine was not the official journal of the hardware industry. Goldstein, of blessed memory, was a repugnant pornographer. That's what he was. And so I was invited to be on this television show, and I was somewhat blindsided. I had no idea that Goldstein was going to be on as well. And the interviewer obviously leaned far more towards the side of Goldstein, so he gave him the first lot. He sort of basically threw him a low ball and said, so, what is the crux of your life work? Goldstein said, well, I've always seen it as part of my work to help free Americans of their repression and to make them more sexually open. And I've really fought always for the First Amendment because it's a sacred duty to make it possible to abolish censorship and allow Americans to read and look at whatever they wish. And I just feel that I want to let Americans get more in touch with themselves. Of course, it wasn't until later that I realized he meant that literally. But and after he'd gone on like this for a few minutes, the host of the show turned to me and, my camera got his little red light on there, and I felt like a deer in the headlights, and the interviewer said, so, Rabbi Lapin, what do you have to say to that? And I said, well, I'm profoundly grateful to Mr. Goldstein, because I now see that he warrants a statue on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And all this time, I just thought he was a degenerate, horribly dirty old man selling degrading material to the depraved. And so, at that moment, Goldstein gave me some advice as to what I should do, which I subsequently realized was anatomically impossible anyway. And they had to immediately, they shut down the cameras, they bleeped out the audio. And that was perhaps my very worst television exposure ever of all time. But it did teach me a lesson, and that is that even pornographers need to feel that they're doing something morally worthy. And that's true for all of us. And I realized that one of the great secrets of the entire world of what I call ancient Jewish wisdom focuses on the moral worthiness and on the dignity of making money. There is no reason, says Jewish tradition, to feel guilty about making money. And I thought that it would be helpful if we would take a little look at that and analyze the extent to which we, of any background, the people of every possible persuasion, to what extent can everybody get behind this notion that making money is not immoral, rather the contrary. And I would like to take you through some of the background in ancient Jewish wisdom. And I think that my goal really would be essentially to answer the question of how is it that Jews have always been disproportionately good with money. And one of the answers, and one of the most crucial aspects of the answer, is because we deeply believe that making money is moral and worthy. But where does the other approach come from? Where do we get the idea from that making money is intrinsically evil? And there is considerable portions of the population who do believe that. Where does this come from? And I really worked quite hard on trying to understand it. And I think I have three main explanations for where the notion comes from that making money is really, really bad. Well, I think the first part of it is that there is not a great deal of understanding of the process of making money. There is a lot of criticism in the country. You hear it all the time. A lot of criticism of CEOs who are making too much money, or of CEOs and business professionals who are not paying their fair share. Have you heard that one? Now here's an interesting thing. The Lord's language, that's Hebrew, has no word for certain concepts. So for instance, and we take this very seriously, obviously modern Hebrew in Israel has had to come up with many words that are a part of modern life. And a man called Eliezer ben Yehuda in the very early days of Jewish settlement in Palestine developed a language institute to devise authentic Hebrew words for modern ideas. And he probed the Bible and he probed Jewish literature, 2,000 years worth of it, to find sources for such things as telephone. How do you come up with a Hebrew word for telephone? And I think you'll be relieved to hear that after enormous work and the dedicated diligence of hundreds of intellectuals, they actually came up with a Hebrew word for this device without which we couldn't live today. And in Hebrew it is called telephone. And they struggled similarly with words for television and words for university, and fortunately they came up with words like televisia and universita. So Hebrew is alive and well and doing good. But the Lord's language, in its biblical essence, lacks conspicuously certain ideas. So for instance, there is no Hebrew word for adolescent, which when you think about it, as Shakespeare said in A Winter's Tale, that period, that age of adolescence is a curse on parents. And so Hebrew just doesn't acknowledge the existence of it. You can choose. If you want to be a 40-year-old kid, that's fine. We will treat you like a 40-year-old kid. If you want to be a 9-year-old adult, that's also fine. What you can't do is be an adolescent, which is somebody who wants the advantages of being a kid and the advantages of being an adult all wrapped up in one. That doesn't work. So in Hebrew, no word for adolescent. In Hebrew, this is a more challenging one, Hebrew, no word for retirement. And so with apologies to any of you who may be in that fortunate situation of never having to work for a living again, the Lord's language doesn't acknowledge that as a reality. Why not? No word for retirement. I'll tell you why. And this will bring us full circle to where we have to get. Because there is no reason that any of us are working for money. We are working in order to fulfill the needs of God's other children. The money flows as a result. Retirement is essentially turning around and saying, and again, I'm speaking academically now, not personally, because I understand that it's a wonderful aspiration to be able to reach a point of not having to work. But the point is anyways, to understand that conceptually, what you're saying in retirement is, I've made enough money, so I'm quitting now, I'm not helping any more people. So if you were a financial planner, or you were a plumber, or you were a shoe repairer, or you were a lawyer, whatever you were, there were a whole lot of people depending on you. Have you ever had the situation of your car mechanic telling you he's quitting and closing up his shop? It's terrible. Have you ever had a dentist tell you, well, that's it, you're going to have to move on, I'm selling my practice? It's terrible. I don't want to change. Retirement is saying, you know what, I got enough now, so I'm done helping you. And God forbid it should happen to nobody here. Everyone should live in good health. But generally speaking, retirement isn't good for health. And I'm speaking from the point of view of a religious person. I understand that maybe the majority of you are not, and I'm very accustomed to speaking to audiences of people of every possible background. I'm quite certain that the overwhelming majority of my radio audience is not religious. And that's absolutely fine, because everything that I say should be judged on its own merits, not because of any religious text or anything else. I'm just disclosing my own background and the origin of much of my thinking. But to me, the idea there is very simple, that as long as I am needed by other human beings, I can pray to God to take care of my health. But if nobody needs me anymore, in fact, by virtue of my insurance policy, my life insurance policy, maybe even my family would be better off without me. Don't be surprised, Lapin, if the good Lord hears your message loud and clear. So I'm not retiring anytime. It's just out of the question. But there's no word for retirement in the Lord's language. There's no word in the Lord's language for the word fair. So much so, I mean, can I just ask you, how many of you have been in Israel? My wife and I just came back from there. I like to spend a month riding there every year. We've been blessed to be able to do that. And it's really funny because something that little kids learn, I mean, I'm sure your kids, you remember kids doing this. Kids are like born knowing how to say it's not fair. No, they don't say it, they whine it. It's not fair, right? How many times have you heard that? Who taught your kids that? Was there some malevolent saboteur in preschool? Who ever taught your kids to say, oh, it's not fair? I don't know. They just know it. Kids in Israel are no different, except they're handicapped because there's no word in Hebrew for fair. So what do you think they say? They say in Hebrew, zeh, which means this or it, law, not fair. And you hear little kids whining, zeh law fair. They have no option but to use the English word because it doesn't exist in Hebrew. Why doesn't it exist in the Lord's language? After all, you would have thought, would you not, that the Bible, if you didn't know anything about it, if you were just guessing, don't you think you'd say that the Bible has to be full of words like fair? I mean, the good Lord wants you to behave in a fair way, right? You'd expect that. Not once. Not once. 80,000 words in the 5 books of Moses, not a single one of them is the word fair. You know why? Because it's ill-defined. What does fair mean? I mean, with all due respect to any politicians who are here, but I have to tell you, It's my belief that when a politician says you should pay your fair share, I think he's thinking kind of like 100%. Because what does it mean? You rich people who can afford to spend a night here at Moravian College, you should pay your fair share. How much is that? Just tell me. Like, what are you thinking? 60%, 70%, 90%? Just tell me. No, never defined. Because if you define what you really think, there'll be a revolution. So you just use a nice word like fair. And everybody says, yeah, they should all pay their fair share, because they don't need me. That's what the word fair means. Absolutely nothing. It means absolutely nothing at all. And so we take a look at some of the principles that come out of the Old Testament, and we try and understand from that why is there so much distrust of the process of making money. Is it just that businessmen are so conspicuously evil, and they are so malevolent, and they are such cheats, and they are so greedy, that they just fill the rest of us righteous folks with indignation? So I considered that possibility. Maybe business professionals, entrepreneurs, people who try to run their local dry cleaner or their little grocery store, maybe they're all so terrible. And they're so busy cheating everybody, and they're so busy stealing, and they're so busy exhibiting greed, and they're so busy stomping on widows and orphans in their relentless climb to the top, that everybody legitimately hates business people. Anyone who's in the business of making money, you're just terrible. So I thought, here's a good idea. Why don't we do a test? Why don't we count how many business people there are in the country? And it's not a tough process to come up with a fairly decent approximation. Then I want to count how many doctors there are in the country. And then I want to count how many teachers there are in the country. Then I want to see how many teachers have got into trouble for sexual relationships with their students. How many doctors have lost their licenses for operating intoxicated or under drugs? And then we'll compare on a per capita basis. Because I think everybody assumes doctors, now those are really, really terrific people. They're almost as good as lawyers. And teachers. Now, who could possibly be against a teacher? Right? So I thought this was a reasonable thing. Now, I ran into a little bit of an interesting snag as I was working up the numbers for teachers who got into trouble for sex with students. I'm talking not university, I'm talking about high school level, that's all I looked at. And I finally solved the problem. Initially, I was bugged because it seemed to be very weighted in the direction of female teachers with male students. And that sort of seemed odd to me, because if you're a male teacher and you're surrounded by nubile 17-year-olds who may be throwing themselves at you, that would seem to me to be a fairly reasonable set of circumstances. So why are the numbers wrong? And then, of course, I spoke to a social scientist who looked at me as if I was a total idiot, and she said, don't you get it? It's obvious. And I'm sure you've all got it already. It took me considerably longer. It's very simple. And that is that when a male teacher has a relationship with a 17-year-old 11th or 12th grader, she's mortified, and she doesn't talk about it. But when a 17-year-old student has had his hot teacher, he's not going to keep quiet for 5 minutes. He's going to tell the whole world. And so it's always female teachers who get indicted and get into trouble. And by the way, this stuff's totally available on the internet. You can get all the same statistics I did. I had to dig a little bit deeper to get the male on female, male teacher, female student. Anyway, suffice it to say, ladies and gentlemen, that the percentage, the per capita rate of teachers stepping out of line is nearly 100 times higher than the number of business people stepping out of line. The number of doctors who lose their licenses for operating in the intoxication of either drugs or alcohol, nearly 10 times per capita the number of business people who get indicted for fraud or dishonesty. And so I had to reject the idea that people hate business professionals because they're such an evil, horrible bunch of people. Apparently they're not. What is more, I also decided to measure the charitable level, the charitable giving of doctors, teachers, and business professionals. And I'm quite sure that I don't have to tell you how that one came out. Doctors and teachers give a pittance. And if you look at their tax returns, again, you can't get, obviously you're not getting name information, but you're getting statistics. You'll find that overwhelmingly the charitable donations of doctors and teachers are what are called in kind. Let's see, how much can I write off a bag full of my old underwear for? It's true. And now, how's about what business people give? Well, why don't you just take a look at some of the names on the buildings of various universities? Take a look at the names on hospitals. Those aren't the names of the doctors there. Those are the names of business people who gave that money. And so I saw an interesting thing here, and that is that people, clearly it's not just that business people are terrible, but there is a confusion, there is a difficulty and a challenge in people understanding what business people do. And this is why that famous word fair is always applied to people in business. Oh, the business people have to give their fair share. Hey, did anybody look to see what NFL players make on an annual basis? Has anybody looked at NFL contracts? Why does nobody say, well, it's time that football players gave back to society and did their fair share? Why is there no hostility towards very, 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 very wealthy football players? I'll tell you the answer. Because I don't know about, I mean, some of you look like you're in great shape, but I look at a football player and I say, you know what, Lapin? As much as you might try, there is no way you could run a ball up the field like he does. Now I get why he makes the big bucks. He does something I couldn't do. Why does nobody resent movie stars with stupendous fortunes? Why do politicians not attack them? Well, it's time that Tom Cruise did his fair share. We must check to see how much tax Tom Cruise pays. Why only the CEO of General Electric? What about actors and actresses? No. Because I look at an actor and I say, you know, Lapin, some people win the ovarian lottery and some lose it. He won. I look at an actress and I say, makes perfect sense to me. I'm happy to pay $10 to sit and look at her for an hour and a half in a dark room. Oh, let me just clarify. I mean a theater, okay? A cinema. A cinema. Stop it, you people are terrible. It makes sense. But now we come up to the businessman or the businesswoman. I call them the business professional because there's women today are just as successful. What about them? What do they do? And nobody can get it. All they do is they sit in the corner office on the top floor of the building and they go to expensive lunches and they talk to people on the phone and they spoil the environment. That's all they do. And people don't get it. And nobody thinks that, wait a moment. In 1985, there was a spoiled, brash young man who had started a business called Apple Computer. And finally, they decided they needed some adult management. And they brought in John Scully to run Apple. And he did run Apple into the ground. And it took 11 years. And Apple was a shadow of its former self. It had not issued any new products. They were still running on the old early Mac. It was a mess. And they had fired, the first thing John Scully did was fired a man called Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs went off and he helped start a movie production company called Pixar. And I'm sure, like me, you've enjoyed many of the great products that Pixar's put on the screen. And then he went and started a computer company called Next, which didn't do much of anything. And for 11 years, Steve Jobs was doing his thing. Apple was sinking lower and lower and lower. And eventually the board of directors got rid of John Scully and they brought in Gil Amelio. Guess what the very first thing Gil Amelio did was? He went to have coffee with Steve Jobs and he said, "We want you back at Apple." What a glorious moment. Imagine being Steve Jobs, thrown out in disgrace 11 years earlier, and now they say, "We need you back." What happens to Apple stock the day he comes back? Goes up. It's like the whole market, all of us, the collective wisdom of you and me and all our friends, our collective wisdom said, that's the guy who's going to turn it around. And in December 96, Steve Jobs comes back, and the rest is history. The iPhone followed a little while after that, and I'm sure that many of you have one in your pockets right now. One person makes a difference. Now, how much is Steve Jobs worth paying? If you own Apple stock, what's it worth to get him back? Quite a lot of money, I think. But that is not easy to understand. Because I know what the footballer does, and I know what the movie star does. But it's hard to explain the subtle change that came about when one man takes his place at his desk. Extraordinary. There's similar stories of Warren Buffett and Lehman Brothers. There are all kinds of where one person comes in and makes all the difference. Now it works the other way as well. The other way it works is that in no other field than business is lack of performance judged so swiftly and so firmly. Because you can get away with it in many other fields. But in business, last week, the marketing manager of Coca-Cola, 57-year-old Mr. Tripoli, got ignominiously fired. Gone, finished. No more job, no more office, no more driver, finished. Because his figures, the sales figures, were below expectations for 3 quarters. It's enough, out. So that same person who was making big bucks loses it overnight if his performance isn't up there all the time. It's a tough area. But people don't understand. It's much harder to explain what the CEO of a company does than what a footballer does or what a movie star does. It's much, much harder. The other reason that people do not like business is because of something that is a little bit more complicated. But I know that I can impart it to you quite quickly here this evening. I want to speak for a moment about the difference between physical and spiritual. Now, please know that when I speak about spiritual, I'm not talking about God, I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking scientifically. Here's the definition of physical and spiritual. Physical is something that can be measured in a laboratory. Spiritual cannot be measured in a laboratory. It's as simple as that. Is there such a thing as a spiritual reality in the world in which we live? Well, I would suggest that many of the things that add most value to our lives are spiritual, not physical. Let me talk about the love you enjoy from your family members. That's spiritual. There's no way to measure that in a lab. How about the loyalty of friends? That means something to me in my life. Is there a way of measuring it? Not at all. Let's imagine that medical science is just a little further down the road than it already is. And let's imagine the woman who comes in for an amniocentesis. She wants to know about the future of the child she's carrying. And she says to the doctor, would you be able to tell me, please, if my child's going to be male or female? Doctor says, sure. There it is. Test male. She says, that's terrific. Would you be able to tell me if this child is going to have a tendency, a genetic tendency towards being a little on the large side or very much on the... This doctor does a test and says, yeah, the genes lean towards a fairly large bone structure. It's a euphemism. And she says, okay, do you think you could let me know if this baby has black skin or white skin? The doctor raises his eyebrows. She says, look, I have an active social life. That's all there is to it. And the doctor says, yeah, sure, I can do that. That's not a problem. Then she says, could you tell me if this baby is going to have, we know he's going to be male. Is he going to have a bald pattern or is he going to have a full head of hair? Doctor does a test and says, yep, he's going to have plenty of hair, no problem. Then she goes on and she says, Doc, you're doing great. We're on a roll here. I now need to know, is my child going to be a loyal friend? What does the doctor say? Sorry, man. Not only don't we have any test for that now, we never will. Medical science will never have a test for whether your baby is going to be loyal. She says, okay, fine. How about, could you tell me if my child's going to have the quality of persistence? I want a child who, even when he gets knocked down, is going to pick himself up and go for it again. Doctor says, sorry, can't do that either. Why? Because male, female, black, white, hair, bald, large, small, these are merely physical characteristics. They're only physical characteristics. And the things that really make us who we are spiritual. When you get hired by any organization, by any company, or when you are looking to hire somebody, I guarantee you that you are seeking spiritual characteristics, not physical ones. The only exception, of course, is if you're trying to become a swimsuit model, which I actually, a few years ago, did apply for. I think that was cruel. There's no reason to laugh. And I'll be honest with you, I got turned down everywhere I applied, which I think just goes to show that anti-Semitism is alive today. And if you're not trying to become a swimsuit model, all that people are looking for are your spiritual characteristics. Integrity, ability to get on, ability to work with a vision, ability to interact properly with other people. This is all spiritual, not physical. That's spiritual. There's a big difference between physical and spiritual. I'll give you one last example before we get to the point. Last example is that I just bought an expensive piece of software, Office 2013, $400. And second day, before I even have a chance to do anything, one of my kids takes the disc, the DVD it comes on, and drops it in the toaster. This is a bit depressing. And so I pick up the phone, I call Bill Gates. I say, Bill, I'm a bit embarrassed about this, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to give me at least a discount on the replacement. But my child dropped my copy of Office 2013 into the toaster. It's useless. I can no longer load it into my computer. Bill Gates has an interesting response. He says, Rabbi Lapin, do you happen to know the serial number? I said, well, as a matter of fact, I have a habit of writing down serial number. He says, that's all I need. We'll pop a new one in the mail to you tomorrow. I said, how much will you take off my credit card? He says, nothing. I said, nothing? He says, no. You of all people should know that software is spiritual. You can't destroy spiritual things. It's like the soul, but that's another subject. I'm really pretty impressed with this, and the new piece of software arrives in the mail, and I'm good to go. I think to myself, you know, my Lenovo laptop has seen a few years already. So late one night, I sneak down to the lake and I drop it in the lake. Next morning, I put a phone call through, and the first thing they tell me is that it's no longer the ThinkPad owned by IBM, it's now a Chinese company, so it's going to be a long-distance call. Okay, so we call China, and I get somebody who speaks better English than I do, and I say, listen, you know, would you believe it, a really silly thing, my daughter dropped my computer in the lake, and I thought that just like Microsoft, you guys wouldn't mind shooting me another one if I give you my address. And they say, Rabbi Lapin, of all people, you should know that a laptop isn't spiritual, it's physical. And you can destroy physical things. You just did. We'll be happy to send you another one. What's your credit card number? Physical and spiritual are different. One of the rules of a physical object is that it can only occupy one place in the space-time continuum. Another way of saying that is it can only be at one place at any given moment. That's a rule of physical things. And so, for instance, if I take this watch and I put it right over there, right now this watch is here and it isn't anywhere else. It's right there. Now, if you come up, take this watch away and go back to your seat with it, the watch is now there and not here. That's the rule with physical things. If I had a saxophone, and I had a saxophone on the table, and you came and took it and went back to your seat, I am now minus the saxophone, you have the saxophone. And here is the beautiful transition. If you believe that money is physical, then anybody who has any of it means that there are other people who do not. If you believe, I'm going to say that again, if you believe that money is physical, then if you've got a few dollars, we could easily find a whole bunch of people who are minus that money. Because anything physical can only be in one place at any given moment. If you've got a bunch of those dollars, then you must have taken them from me and a whole lot of other people. And so the more materialistic a society becomes, the more oblivious the society becomes to the spiritual reality of life, the more convinced that society becomes that money is physical and material, and therefore anybody who has too much of it is obviously guilty of malfeasance in some area or another. He has to have taken it from others. And so the only question is whether money is more like a saxophone or more like a tune. See, a tune is spiritual. Can you measure a tune in a lab? No. There is no instrument today or tomorrow or ever that will be able to predict the effect on the human soul of a certain piece of music. It takes a human genius to write a music that'll make people's feet tap and they'll make them want to dance, and a type of music that'll make men willing to march off to war, and another type of music that'll make people weep in grief. Only the genius of a human soul can create that sort of music. There is no instrument in any lab on earth that can listen to a piece of music and tell you the effect it will have on a human being. Oh, there are apps that will tell you the name of a piece of music for sure, but no app that will tell you whether, because music is spiritual. The instrument that makes it is physical. And that's why I can destroy the saxophone, but I can never destroy a song. Impossible. I can destroy a computer, but how do you destroy software? You can't. That disk weighs the same on a scale before you put an expensive program on it and after. It's all spiritual. That's the difference. And so, what we have to ask ourselves is whether money is more like candles or more like cake. Let's imagine that when we finish here, and I know that for some of you that can't happen soon enough, let's imagine that when we finish here, everybody is going to get a beautiful big plate of chocolate mousse cake. Professor Rossi, that isn't on the... it is not happening. I submit it as an idea, I'm just saying. We're going to have to use our imagination. Everybody is now going to get a plate of chocolate mousse cake, including me, right there. Excepting that as a bald Jewish rabbi who's obviously already had one dessert too many, I don't want one dessert, I want 10. So all I do is really simple. I go to the first 9 people over here, and I behave a little bit like the government. I tax you. And I just take away your plates of cake. And I take away 9 pieces of cake from you 9 people up front here, and I bring them all back here. Now I've got 10 pieces of cake. Because cake is physical. And if I take it to me, then I must have taken it away from where it was before. That's a law. On the other hand, it may just be possible that money is more like candlelight. And you might imagine a restaurant that's a little bit too dark, and there's just, you've been in these restaurants, there's just a tiny little candle on each table. And I mean, you can barely see the person you're talking to, and you begin to suspect that it's so dark because they don't want you to see the food. And all of a sudden, I walk in with a whole handful of candles. And I walk up to your tables and I take a flame from the tiny little candle on each of yours, and then I put a bigger candle on every table, and pretty soon the restaurant's a blazing beacon of incandescence. There's light everywhere and everyone's terrific. Have I taken away anything from any of you? No. But I took a light from your candle on your table. Yeah, but light has spiritual overtones. That's something that Einstein and Minkowski realized in the early days of the 20th century. Light is a very strange commodity. We don't know if it's a wave, we don't know if it's a photon, very difficult, and maybe it's both. And in any event, there is this bizarre relationship between information and light. So, light appears to have spiritual qualities. And I certainly am not taking anything away from you if I take light from you to light my candles. In fact, I'm making the world a lighter place. And we've got to decide. If money is physical, then people who have more of it than other people are not good people, by the evidence of what they hold in their bank account, by evidence of what they have in their wallet. If money is spiritual, then it's entirely different. If it's spiritual, it's like a tune. It can be brought into existence, taking nothing away from you. You can teach me a tune. I now make the world a more musical place, and I've taken nothing from you. And that's the question. Whether money is more like candles or more like cake. That's the whole question. And I would submit to you that when ancient Jewish wisdom insists that money is entirely spiritual, I would submit that they got a point, and they're right. And I'll tell you what I mean. I'll give you an example. Think for a moment of great-grandpa Lapin. He was a very honorable person. In addition to being a rabbi, he earned his living by being a peddler. Do you know what a peddler was? He used to drive a beat-up old Chevy pickup from little town to little town, and he would buy and sell. And so what I want to do is just take 90 seconds walking you through a day in the life of Grandpa Lapin. But we'll leave out the disappointments, we'll leave out the inevitable hardships and aggravations that happen to everybody, and we'll just move quickly through an ideal day in the life of Grandpa Lapin. Are you okay if I do that?
Yes.
Okay. Grandpa Lapin knocks on the door of the first house, and there's no sound. The door doesn't work. All I wanted to do was a little sound effect. Just wanted to help. Okay, that works. So Grandpa Lapin knocks on the door. The lady opens the door. He says, do you have anything here you don't need? She says, I don't think so. He says, think carefully. She says, well, there's that old table that we don't need anymore. He says, really? A table? She says, yeah, that's right. He says, what are you doing with it? She says, we got no use for it. We're putting it out in the alley. The city will come pick it up on Tuesday. Grandpa Lapin is not slow. He says, is the city picking it up from you for free? She says, when did the city ever do anything for free? Of course not. They're charging us $5 to cart it away. Grandpa Lapin says, tell you what, if you help me load it onto my pickup, I'll give you $5. Lady says, deal. And that's what they do. Now, quick pause here for some arithmetic. How much better off is this family when Grandpa Lapin drives away?
$10.
$10, right? $10. Now, every now and then people say 5, that doesn't get right, means we've got to do a whole lot of remedial arithmetic. So they're $10 better off. Grandpa Lapin now stops at the hardware store and he buys a little paint, he buys some nail to fix up a wobbly leg and paint out the scratches, and then he knocks on the next door. Yeah, I like that. And lady opens the door and he says, anybody here need a table? She says, well, I got a daughter getting married next week. We can check and see what she's doing. They call the daughter up. Daughter takes a look at Grandpa Lapin and says, yeah, what do you want? She says, do you have a table? She says, not yet. She says, where are you going to get a table? You need a table when you get married. Lady says, we're going to Ethan Allen. She says, how much are you paying for a table there? $20. Grandpa Lapin says, tell you what, I'll give you a table I've got on my pickup for $10. Now, mind you, it had a scratch. I painted it up. It had a wobbly leg I nailed up. But come take a look at it. Daughter goes out and looks at it. She says, you know what? For a starter table, good idea. We'll do this. And they carry the table in. How much better off is this family than they were before Grandpa Lapin knocked on their door? Also 10. So in aggregate, the little village now is better off by how much? No, 21, because you forgot the dollar in the hardware store till. Grandpa Lapin. Now, some of you are going to say, well, whoa, that's undone because Ethan Allen is... No, Ethan Allen hasn't lost anything. If you look at the asset value of their inventory, nothing has changed. What they had yesterday, they got today. They didn't get a sale, but they'll sell it to somebody else. Basically, right now, if you look at their financial statement, nothing is different. If you look at the financial statements of these two families, assuming we're not confined to GAAP accounting, okay, because GAAP accounting has, I mean, what do you want me to use? Sarbanes-Oxley in this example? But if we allow a financial statement to actually reveal the financial welfare felt by the individuals, then family number 1 is better off by $10. Family number 2 is better off by $10. Clearly, the hardware store is better off by $1. So Grandpa Lapin, by moving through this village, has brought into existence $21. Now, you might say this is rabbinic smoke and mirrors, but it isn't. Because if you remember that money is more like a tune than it is like a saxophone, it can be brought into existence. It doesn't have to come from anywhere else. And if you still are skeptical of me, which hurts, I will ask you to think of the one internet company that was profitable from day one, and it is not Amazon. They lost money for 7 years, and they got a rotten quarter right now. But one company that has made money every quarter from day one on the internet called eBay. So I checked up with eBay how many transactions are going on at any given instant on eBay. The answer is 75,000, give or take. And here is the best definition of eBay. It's 75,000 grandpa Lapins all working simultaneously. That's what eBay is. Do you follow? They buy from some people, they're selling to others. Everybody feels better off afterwards, otherwise they wouldn't use it. And guess what? There's a little arbitrage in Grandpa Lapin's pocket at the end of the day. By the way, let's see how good the arithmetic really is. How much is in Grandpa Lapin's pocket right now, profit?
5, 4.
The answer is $4. Right. He made $4. The family number 1 made 10. Family number 2 made 10. The hardware store made 1. From what? From one human being serving another. That is what brings money into existence. People doing things for other people. And so, let me go back to my sources and my origins. And again, you can really take it from your own particular beliefs and backgrounds. It makes absolutely no difference because we really are only talking about measurable realities. Where it comes from is neither here nor there, but it just reveals my own background, and I want you to know me as well as you can. And so, for those of you with any familiarity with the Bible, and it's kind of interesting, but we live in the first epoch of maybe 2,000 years in which there are educated and sophisticated people who are utterly ignorant of the Bible. This wasn't like that. 100 years ago in America, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that in England. You will remember that when Johann Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1450, what was the first book he published? It was not the Vienna Telephone Directory. What was the very first book he published? It was the Bible. It was unthinkable to do anything else. What phrase did Samuel Morse use when he provided in 1848 the first communication breakthrough in all of human history? Up till that point, information traveled in this world no faster than a man riding a horse. That was how you got information around. It's mind-boggling to think that they used to fight wars with massive frowning. How did Central Command know what was going on in a battle 2 days ride away? But they did. That was the only way. Samuel Morse comes up with a way of communicating, 1848, 9th of May, 24th day of the month, and what happens? He chooses a verse from the biblical book of Numbers. What hath God wrought? Why? Because everybody knew the Bible, that's why. We live in this strange time today where people truly, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying anything has to change. It's just interesting to me that I would have been considered perfectly average, biblically speaking, 100 years ago. And like today, I'm a little bit unusual, not very, but at least, that's something I do know. And one of the things I know is that God starts off in the book of Genesis as a pretty cheerful sort of guy. In fact, he starts making things, and his reaction to everything he makes is, oh, this is great, I like that, this is terrific. Which is remarkable. I mean, he made France and said it's good. Everything. Everything. So this is an extremely cheerful deity. When is the very first time God gets grumpy? Very first time. All of a sudden, we come up with something that he thinks is not good. Everything up till now is good. Everything. Now there's something that's not good. You know what it is? And God said, it's not good for man to be alone. Now, ancient Jewish wisdom elaborates on this and says, look, this isn't just about Adam's matrimonial prospects. This is a general statement that it is not good, not only for the man to be alone, but it's even worse for society when a man is alone. What do I mean by that? Well, I would ask you only this question. Your car breaks down at 2 o'clock in the morning in a really bad part of town. Now, I know you don't have anything like that in Bethlehem, but let's imagine you're in Los Angeles. And you get out of your car, and would you believe it, your cell phone is dead. And you see 8 people coming to you from the other end of the alley. Would you or would you not be relieved to discover that it's not 8 guys, but it's 4 men out for a walk with their wives? Would that be good news? I think so. That's what it means when it says not good for man to be alone. It's not good for society when men are alone. Do you remember the Unabomber from years ago? Guys who are alone are always up to no good. No, honestly, I mean, if you were starting a little town, and the great big organizer in Washington, D.C. said, you're going to have to take, in your little startup town of 1,000 people, you're going to have to take 150 single people. You've got a choice. Do you want 150 women or 150 men? I mean, this is not a hard guess. 150 men? You're asking for trouble. And that's one of the reasons that the settlements in the early days of North America, the settlements that worked were the ones that had women. The ones that were men only didn't work. That's all encompassed in that one sentence, not good for man to be alone. And here is how I see this. Again, feel free to translate this into secular terms or Buddhist terms or Christian, whatever you want, it doesn't matter. But here's the basic point, that an economic system and money is God's way of incentivizing us to connect with other people. Do you know what the Dunbar number is? It's again a social science number. It was somewhat popularized by a terrific writer called Malcolm Gladwell in a book called The Tipping Point. What he established was that the most significant correlation among people who make a lot of money is what? Not education, not whether they finished college or not. The one single most important correlation is how many friends they have. The more people that know you, like you, and trust you, the more money you will make. That was what he established. So terrific. Once again, God is incentivizing me to be a good guy. Because this incredible blessing of financial bounty will only come to me if I'm not a loner. Because loners can't make any money. You can only make money by interaction with other people. That's what this is all about. And so one of the basic principles in ancient Jewish wisdom is friendship. Be a good person, connect with people, make friends. And it's not uncommon at all for Jews to think in terms of, hey, how many new friends did I make this month? How's my Rolodex grown? Not in a cynical way of how many people are there that I can use, because people know very quickly when you're using them. But what do people who are successful do? They go out of their way to do favors for other people. Now, this is good business, but I believe it also makes God smile. What could be better? We are incentivized to take care of other people. Furthermore, let's look at specialization, which the Western world began to get a handle on, mainly with Adam Smith, a little bit earlier, but mainly Adam Smith, late 18th century. Specialization was this like big breakthrough. But think for a moment again, if you're interested, the end of the book of Genesis is father Jacob dying, and he's got 12 sons. And so he gathers them together in the last chapter of Genesis, and he says to them, well, why don't I stop for a second? Why don't I tell you what I would have done if it was me? I would have said, boys, gather around, all 12 of you. You know what? You've all been gigantic pains in the neck. I'm 147 years old. I'm going home to the Lord. It's enough. God bless you all. I'm gone. Instead of which, the chapter uses up 30 verses with Jacob giving a separate blessing to each one of the 12 sons. What's that about? Well, I'd say it was an accident if it wasn't for the fact that exactly the same thing is repeated at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Because now, it's many years later, and Moses is dying, and there's the 12 tribes of Israel, which Joshua has to now take over the Jordan. And if it was me, I'd say, hey, people, you've been gigantic pains in the rear end these last 40 years in the desert. I'm 120 years old. God bless you. I could care less. I'm gone. And instead of which, Moses spends another 30 verses blessing each tribe separately. There is the Jewish principle of specialization. We don't do anything that we can hire somebody else to do for us. That's a key thing. You try to start up a business, and before you know where you are, you're overwhelmed with the books, and you're overwhelmed with sales and with vendors, and you just can't do anything anymore. The system that the good Lord set up incentivizes you to specialize. Why? Well, here's the answer, and it's beautiful. It really is beautiful, because it shows genuine compassion and genuine caring about people. I ask you to imagine, if you like, 4 farmers that all live years ago in the Lehigh Valley. And each one is fully self-contained. Each farmer raises cows for dairy, and they raise sheep for wool, and they grow some cotton, and they grow corn, and they grow wheat. Each family is totally independent. Think about what happens. First of all, each family, each farm views all the others as competitors. Anything you use means less for me. Water, air, anything. We're all competitors. And along comes the biblical principle of specialization. And God says, tell you what, I'm going to reward you for learning specialization. You learn specialization, and I will give you more money for less effort. What do you mean? Well, these 4 families get together, and one day out of the blue, they have a little meeting, and one of them says, you know what, I've noticed, you grow great potatoes and wheat and corn, but your dairy products are awful. I do great dairy products. I've got a good idea. Why don't we get together once a week, and I'll give you all the dairy products you need. You give me all the corn and potatoes that I need. And then the third guy jumps in and says, well, you know, I do the best wool. And they all say, yeah, you're right. Your sheep look healthier than any other. Okay, fine. You can come along as well. We'll call it market. And the fourth guy comes on and says, well, I do clothing and weaving, and they say, yeah, your family's always so well dressed, like you do your farming in these satin tuxedos, it's beautiful. So, and they get together, and what happens? What happens to the economic welfare of each of these 4 families? Skyrockets. We know this is a fact, but there's something more important that happens. All of a sudden, they start praying for one another's welfare. Now they don't see each other as competitors. I want you to do really well so I can get great wool. And I want you to do really well so I can get great wheat. And I want you to do really well so I can get nice tuxedos. And all of a sudden, in a society of specialization, we want everybody to do well. And so here we have a beautiful system that is intrinsically moral. Are there bad apples in the world of business? Of course there are. I mean, we've seen abominable behavior in Wall Street, but not as many as there are in the medical profession, and not as many as there are in the teaching profession. But we all understand what doctors do, and we all understand what teachers do. We don't understand what business professionals do. We don't understand what people do in finance. We don't get it. And so we fear and loathe things we don't get. And the result is that the culture in both politics and entertainment beam out this idea that people who make money must be doing something wrong because they don't understand the process. They think it's all material and physical, and the result is, tragically, a demonization of making money. So much so that the phrase, which is a deplorable phrase, what do they say? What does every commentator say whenever a wealthy philanthropist makes a major gift? Isn't it wonderful to see him giving back to society? So if giving charity is giving back to society, what were you doing to society when you were making the money in the first place? Ripping it away from them. That's what people believe. How about the phrase unearned income? That's a nice one. So if I put my valuable capital at risk on the slight off chance that this startup might work and provide jobs for hundreds of thousands of people, and I might make a few dollars, but most times I'm going to lose. Well, if you actually make a few dollars, we call that unearned income on your tax return, because you had no right to it, really. You know what? When you take control of the language, you've won. And so there we are. There we are. The noble profession of business has been demonized. The business professional has had his integrity called into question simply because of how he makes his living. And society is the poorer for it because fewer and fewer talented people are willing to say, you know what, I'm going to go into business because I want to make money. Samuel Johnson once said that never is anybody more innocently engaged than when trying to increase his own fortune. Think about that for a moment. Think about it. If I asked you all to take out a dollar bill, and I'm not going to do it now because you probably think it's going to be a collection and I'll ask you to pass it down. But if I asked you to take out a dollar bill, and just imagine now, right across this vast auditorium, there's hundreds of dollar bills waving in the air. And I now say, would all of you who held up a convenience store on your way here and got the dollar bill that way, put it away, I don't want to see it. I once said that. The guy stood up and said, well, I'm in law enforcement, I want to see him. But if you mugged a little old lady and you got your dollar bill that way, now what? I don't want to see that either. And if you persuaded the government to take it away from some people and give it to you, I'm not too sure that that's kosher either. But if you didn't do any of these things, and you didn't defraud anyone, you didn't rob anyone, you never got that dollar bill at the point of a gun, I know how you got that dollar bill. I may not know the details, but I know you got that dollar bill by pleasing another one of God's children. I don't know if it was your customer, I don't know if it was your client, I don't know if it was your boss, I don't know if it was a relative, but some human being willingly put that money in your pocket because whatever it was that you do to that person was worth more to them than the dollar bill. That's a good thing. And we haven't even started talking about charity yet. That's something else all entirely. But in an open market, it is not possible to make money without helping other people. You must have come up with something that other people want. Quick question and then we wrap up. Who has done more for more human beings on the planet? Bill Gates or Mother Teresa? I'm afraid the answer is, now I'm not saying he's more saintly. I'm not saying that. I'm not God. I can't look into the hearts of human beings. I only ask, who did more good for more people? Answer, clearly, Bill Gates. Nobody forced you to buy Windows. You could have bought an Apple. Many people do. But if you bought Windows like I did, that's because it improves your life. I don't begrudge him the cost of my software, because I get much more value out of it than I paid for it. You cannot make money without serving God's other children. And the more people you serve, the more money you're going to make. It's as simple as that. And these are all fundamental truths that are embedded in ancient Jewish wisdom. And these are the truths that I spent many, many, many years condensing into 2 books. Thou shalt prosper, the 10 commandments for making money, and Business Secrets from the Bible, 40 spiritual strategies for increasing financial abundance. And I'm very, very candid about this. I'm happy when I meet somebody who wants to make money, like Samuel Johnson said. I'm happy because I understand the relationship. It's straightforward. I hate it when people say, oh, he's only doing it for the money. Look, I'm thrilled to be here tonight. You're a wonderful audience, and I'm not going to push my luck. And I had dinner with some wonderful people, and I've made new friends. But why did I come here tonight? I did it for the money. What do you think? Now, I know you got in here for free, and for the life of me, I don't understand that. That would imply that there's zero value in what I'm imparting to you tonight, and there isn't. There's enormous value. I'm imparting information that could literally transform your financial destiny. Because as soon as you start realizing that I never pray, oh, please, God, can you help me find another $2,000 so I can pay the payment on my BMW this month? I never do that. We always say, please, God, can you help me find some more of your children that need my services, people that I can help, people that I can do things for. That's what we do. Because I don't aim at the money. The money happens automatically. All I aim at is obsessively preoccupying myself with the needs of my fellow human beings. That's all I try to do. And that's true for everybody. That's what makes success. Are there occasional exceptions of horrible, mean-spirited people who make money? Yeah, of course there are. But you know, because George Burns smoked a cigar a day until he was 102, that doesn't make that a really good idea. There are always exceptions. But by and large, the best people in America are America's small business professionals. They really are. They're decent. They support everything that goes on in their neighborhoods and in their societies and in their cultures. They are giving people. They are long-term people. They stay up awake at night worrying about how they're going to pay their employees on time, even though they themselves are not going to get paid. It's a wonderful group of people. And it hurts me that this group of people is isolated for demonization. That somehow there's something mean and horrible and detestable about people who choose to make their money serving other people. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's fair. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why, deep down, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Because there are certain things that are not worth doing even if the money is good. Life is too short for that. But to be able to be here with you tonight, and for you to so graciously allow me the opportunity of presenting my viewpoint on business is something I deeply appreciate. You've been very, very kind. And I would only suggest that, and I'm being, again, very direct, I want you to buy the books. Let me tell you why. I will sign them. But that's something that just lowers their value on the second-hand market. That's not it. I want you to buy those books because if I have ignited anything in your hearts, if I've opened a window to a new way of looking at money for you, that is terrific. but it doesn't change your life until you actually change. And you only bring about change through repetition. This is a little bit like somebody reading you remember I was telling you about that bad part of town in Los Angeles? Somebody's flying to LA, picks up a book in the bookstore at the airport, Self-Defense in 12 chapters. And sure enough, bad part of LA is walking down at night, gets an arm around his shoulder, a piece of metal, sticks him in the back, and the person says, "Give me your wallet." And he says, hold on, in my pocket I've got a book, and I think Attacks from the Rear on chapter 13. Oh, I just got to look that up. That doesn't work. You have to be able to explode into a reaction of violence and inflict serious damage on your attacker without even thinking about it. How does that happen? Not by reading a book once, but by practicing things again and again and again and again. And so here we've spent some time together this evening, and it's rapidly coming to a close, don't worry. And we've made sure that the college has available books. And not only does your buying them put cornflakes on my table, but much more importantly than that, you will thank me. And that means a lot to me. My wife and I, we love the mail we get, and it's a lot of it, from people who tell us how their financial lives have changed. And when you change your financial life, it doesn't just change your finances, it changes your marriage as well. Remember I told you about sex and money before? Right? It's not an accident that guys with a lot of money get the best looking girls. Now I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that when you improve your finances, you improve many things in your life. It is wonderful to be able to transform a problem into an expense. It's great. That's where we focus. These are not books about investing. Investing presumes you've already got money. This is not about getting out of debt. That's very important. You have to do it. But these books are about applying the principles that have worked over hundreds and hundreds of years for millions of Jews in good times and bad, in hospitable countries and in oppressive regimes. Jews have always done well. And it's not because of circumcision, and it's not because of chicken soup, but it's because of a vast body of principles and insights, timeless truths and permanent principles that I've condensed and laid out in a very practicable fashion that enables anybody to pick them up. I am delighted to have been here this evening. I will be even more delighted if a certain number of you are able to take these principles away with you and either use them yourselves, or maybe you have a child or a relative or somebody whose career needs a kickstart, somebody who's thinking about going into business and wants to know how they can ensure themselves of a higher probability of success. All of that is what I cover in a very, very down-to-earth fashion. And again, I wouldn't speak in this way if I wasn't sure that these books can really change lives in a very, very real fashion for you, as they've done for so many other people since the books came out. They are bestsellers. They continue to be bestsellers for a very simple reason, and that is the principles really do work. But regardless, your presence here was in and of itself sufficient for me. I again want to tell you how much I appreciate you. I appreciate you giving me the chance to share some of these ideas with you, and I appreciate Moravian College, Professor Rossi, and the rest of the team for inviting me here and allowing me to be part of this very special evening that will always be part of our memory. God bless you all with health and with prosperity. The rest you have to take care of for yourself.